got my Waffle House Christmas coffee mug. And don't judge me, my pumpkin spice latte for my breakfast cup of coffee this morning. I don't know why they would call it coffee. Anyway, I digress. Welcome. This is our second episode in what's going to be our month-long series about things about Christmas. And if you'll notice on this screen, I have a picture of the Grinch who stole Christmas. Why would I have a picture of the Grinch who stole Christmas in the middle of a Bible study about Jesus and Christmas? There's one real basic reason. I think it's a fabulous story, and I grew up reading Dr. Seuss. I think he's a fabulous storyteller. He was a genius, and I just think the story about the Grinch is funny and heartwarming at the same time. And you got to feel kind of sorry for that dog of his. He's just so rough on that dog. But Christmas is a celebratory time for me and my family. We celebrate it a little bit differently than many others. Since our kids have grown and have moved out on their own, and I have 3 grandchildren, throughout the entire month of December, for us grown-ups, we surprise each other with gifts throughout the entire month. So we don't wait for December 25th to open our gifts. My daughter-in-law just received a gift yesterday. And throughout this month, we'll be spreading our gifts around to our children, and and the thing is, they never know when they're going to show up. No, I don't think I'll plan on stealing Christmas, Henry. I think you're safe. But throughout the entire month, we give each other gifts, and nobody in the family knows when a gift is going to show up. It's part of the surprise. Now, Christmas morning, yes, we save that for our grandchildren because there's just a magical thing about coming down the steps, seeing the tree lit up, and presents underneath the tree that weren't there the night before. So it's we save that for the kids, but for the grandkids. But for the rest of us adults, throughout the month, you never know when a surprise is going to show up. It kind of takes the stress off us adults for Christmas morning. My wife and I, we just get to sleep in and wake up whenever we want to wake up. We've got our gifts throughout the month, and then we make plans to go over to our grandchildren's house later on in the afternoon to enjoy their Christmas day with them. So, that's how we do Christmas at my house. And how the Grinch Stole Christmas is part of my family's tradition. We always watch it, always have. It has nothing to do with Jesus, except for the fact it's part of my celebration. And Jesus always liked a good celebration. Don't you think? Now, let me set up what today we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about Luke's genealogy. And we're going to compare it to Matthew's genealogy because they're different. Now, there are some folks who would say, well, because they're different, one of them must be wrong or both of them are wrong. No, they don't have to be. We'll see why in a minute. Some of it has to do with our Gentile culture, not understanding how the Jewish culture dealt with genealogies. Part of it has to do with the fact that Jesus had 2 parents. One was an adoptive father, and one was his mother. So we're going to see how that plays into the picture. The other thing is, why am I spending 2 episodes on genealogies when it's about the Christmas story, Jesus being born in a manger, and we're going to have plenty of time for that. I'm of the particular opinion that knowledge is power. My dad used to say when I was growing up, stop learning, you start dying. I'm always looking to learn new things. And sometimes the things I learn might appear to be useless at the moment. But sometime in my life, this knowledge almost always comes into play. As an example, I used to not like trigonometry. Not a big math guy. And I didn't understand why trigonometry was important, but I had to take it when I was in school. I had to learn it. And it wasn't until years and years later, married, 2 children, living in a house in Conyers, Georgia. And we wanted to expand our house. And we hired a man to come and do that. And my son was having the same issues with trigonometry that I was, because he was in high school at the time. And our builder showed him how to calculate angles for the roof that he was putting on. It had to be at a certain angle. And he showed him how to do it using a string and a nail and figuring out angles. Angles are very, very important. And all of a sudden, my son realized, and I realized, why trigonometry was important. From a builder's perspective, it was a very practical form of math because it helps you understand angles and things like that you need to build a house. And all of a sudden, we realized why trigonometry was important. Now, it was years between the time I learned trigonometry and the time when I saw it was useful. But that doesn't mean it was useless during all that time. It just means I hadn't found a use for it yet. So a lot of knowledge that we come across will not appear to be useful to us at the moment. But at some point in the future, the reason for it will make sense. Well, sometimes things like genealogies in the Bible are like that. You just see a list of names. So-and-so begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so, who begat so-and-so, who begat so-and-so, yawn. What importance can this possibly have? Well, that's kind of like the genealogies we're dealing with Matthew and Luke. Now, there's 2 genealogies. They're both different from each other. So let's look at it. Let me pull it up here. We saw Matthew's genealogy. Now, one distinctive about Matthew's genealogies, which you don't find in Luke's genealogy, Matthew mentions women. Not a common element in Jewish genealogies, but all of these women were incredibly important to the line of ancestors and ancestresses, if you will, in the genealogy of Jesus. Also, genealogies tend to emphasize people who are important. They're not necessarily concerned with listing everybody who begat everybody. They usually list the most important names in the genealogy. And that's why Matthew's, he said there's 14 generations between Abraham and David, and etc. There's 14, 14, and 14. Let's see what it says here. There were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile in Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. Well, Matthew, being a rather exact guy with numbers and very, very exact guy with recording things, with an eye for detail, he split everything up into 14, 14, 14. These aren't all the ancestors of Jesus. But Matthew took the liberty of splitting up into 14, 14, and 14 because 14 was a very important number in the Jewish religious thinking. It's a multiple of 7. 7's the number of completion. When you wrote the name of David, there were no vowels in Hebrew, so you would only see what today would be the consonants D, V, and D, and those numbers add up to 14. There's all sorts of weird, crinkly little things that come into play here. But just know that Matthew's genealogy is not the full genealogy, necessarily. But he also mentioned the women, because the women he mentioned here are very famous, aren't they? Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Mary. Very important figures in Jesus' genealogy from Matthew's perspective. And Matthew, of course, listed Jeconiah, an evil, wicked king. And if you remember from yesterday, we said that Jeremiah prophesied that none of Jeconiah's offspring will prosper, none will sit on the throne of David or rule anymore in Judah. So Jeconiah was not going to have any of his descendants become physical king of Judah anymore. but none of his descendants will sit in the throne of David. So how can Jesus be called the son of David and inherit the throne of David if he's a descendant of Jeconiah? We're going to answer that question right now. Let's look at Luke's genealogy. The first thing you're going to see, first thing you're going to see is basically this is chapter 3 in Luke. In Matthew, he starts off with the genealogy. In Luke starts his genealogy just before he began his ministry at 30 years of age. So the placement of this genealogy is kind of interesting in Luke's gospel. And you notice the other thing was, in Matthew's gospel, he starts Jesus' genealogy with Abraham. In Luke's gospel, he goes all the way to Adam. Let me back up here again. In Matthew's gospel, he starts from Abraham and works forward in time till he gets to Jesus. In Luke's gospel, he starts with Joseph and works his way back. Now, right away, we start seeing things that are different. It says here, Joseph, son of Heli, son of Mattat. And look up here where it says about Joseph. Jacob, the father of Joseph, who is the husband of Mary. So you can see there's some difference. How can Joseph be the son of Jacob and the son of Heli? Well, let's take a look here. Oh, and the other thing, there are no women in Luke's genealogy. Now, Luke takes you all the way back to Adam. And it's interesting, his title for Adam, the son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. So he traces Jesus' genealogy, lineage, all the way back to Adam, who is the first son of God, if you want to think of it that way. The first Adam. Jesus was called the second Adam sometimes. So there's no women in Luke's genealogy. And Luke's genealogy goes all the way to Adam, as opposed to Matthew's, which just goes back to Abraham. So what's different? Now, please forgive me. I'm actually quoting excerpts from a study Bible that I have access to. I just couldn't say it any better than this, and I'm a big fan of not making anything up if I don't have to. There are several differences between Luke's genealogy and Matthew's. Matthew begins with Abraham, the father of the Jewish people. Well, Luke traces the line in reverse order and goes back to Adam, showing Jesus' relationship to the whole human race. Now that's interesting. See, Jesus is not just a Jewish Messiah. He's Messiah of the entire human race. From Abraham to David, the genealogies of Matthew and Luke are almost the same, but from David on, they're different. Now, many interpreters suggest that this is because Matthew traces the legal descent of the house of David, using only heirs to the throne. Royal lineage, if you will. While Luke traces the direct bloodline of Joseph to David. See, all right? Another common explanation is that Matthew follows the line of Joseph, Jesus' legal father, while Luke emphasizes that lineage of Mary, Jesus' blood relative. Now, although tracing a genealogy through the mother's side is unusual, so is the virgin birth. Luke's explanation here that Jesus was the son of Joseph, so it was thought, brings to mind his explicit virgin birth statement and suggests the importance of the role of Mary in Jesus' genealogy. All right. Now, let's see here. I have no idea what happened there, folks, but we're back. All right, to repeat where we're at right now, there's two genealogies. They're different. And also, this is a very, very important statement down here at the bottom. Ancient genealogies were often very selective, focusing on the most important people. The language of someone being the father or son of another person often meant just that they were an ancestor or descendant. So Matthew picked different names from the genealogy than Luke did. They could both be the same genealogy for the same person, but one person picked one group of people as opposed to the other. Or Matthew could be Joseph, and Luke's could be Mary's genealogy. Now, let's take a look at what they said about Matthew here. By repeating the reference to the deportation to Babylon, Matthew creates 3 series of 14 names, with the 14th name being King David. The Hebrew gematria, or the sum of the numbers that each letter in a name stands for David is 14. Prior to the introduction of vowel points in post-New Testament times, David would have been spelled DVD, using the 4th, 6th, and 4th letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which add up to 14. Given the reference to Jesus as son of David in Matthew 1:1, and Matthew's preference for that title throughout his gospel, it's likely that Matthew crafted Jesus' genealogy to reflect Jesus' royal sonship as heir to the Davidic throne. So that would make sense. I don't know if anybody has watched The Chosen, but their depiction of Matthew, I think, is spot on. Very OCD-ish. Yeah, hi Henry, I'm back. Is very OCD-ish about details and being very precise and being able to have everything wrapped up and make sense. And that could definitely be the case. Now, Luke's distinctives are harder to account for. He may have used all the names he knew about. Now, Luke's is the more universal gospel. So taking Jesus all the way back to Adam and then to God fits that characteristic. A number of different solutions have been suggested to account for the differences in the names with Matthew's genealogy where they run parallel. The most popular has been to suggest that one represents Joseph's legal line, the other his biological line. At any point where a biological heir died childless through the Jewish practice of levirate marriage, the 2 lines could have diverged. In early church history, Luke was favored as providing the legal or royal genealogy, and in modern times, the legal genealogy has often been identified with Matthew. So how can we reconcile these two? Well, another common option has been to see Matthew supplying one of Joseph's 2 lines, with Luke giving Mary's lineage. The 2nd century Protevangelium of James, and it's just a 2nd century writing of an elder named James, reflects an early church tradition that Mary's parents were named Joachim and Anna. Now, a variant form of Joachim is Eliakim, because both Joah from Yah and Eli from El translate Hebrew names for God. An abbreviated form of Eliakim is Eli, or Heli, the person 1 generation before Joseph and Mary. This interpretation would require, so it was thought, Joseph, so it was thought, to be Jesus' father, in the verse to be Luke's clue that Jesus was not really descended from Joseph. So his genealogy must be Mary's. No solution is free from problems, but neither is it necessary to conclude that the differences between genealogies are irreconcilable. Paying attention to the themes and specific interests of both gospel writers helps us to understand many of the differences. Now, again, I apologize for just loading up paragraphs from my NIV study Bible, but I couldn't say it any better than what's being said here. There are several explanations for why these 2 genealogies would be different. Matthew being Joseph's line and Luke's being Mary's line, which would explain why Jesus could still be heir to the Davidic throne, but it would be through Mary. He would legally be heir to the Davidic throne through Joseph, because everything inherited comes through the father's side of the family. So, his bases were covered. But the big thing that comes out of all of this, these genealogies, is that Jesus is truly representative of everybody. He isn't the Jewish Messiah who, because Israel as a nation rejected him, he decided, oh, well, I guess I'll go find me some Gentiles to save. No, he has always been the Messiah of Gentiles and Jews. He didn't come to the Gentiles because Israel rejected him. It was always his plan to come for the Gentiles and Jews. He is the Messiah of the entire human race. There's no one that's excluded on the basis of nationality or race in the kingdom of Jesus. He has rascals, he has criminals, he has wicked kings, good kings, women with shady pasts, and men who had shady dealings. His genealogy isn't squeaky clean. He represents everybody. And that's why these genealogies are important to me. That's what I've learned so far about why Jesus is who he is my Messiah, as well as a Jewish Messiah. And it gives me knowledge. Now, not all this knowledge, can I apply it right now to anything specific in my life? No. But I'm a bit of a nerd about this kind of stuff, and I think it's fascinating to finally figure out why these two genealogies are different and how I can reconcile them. And also it's comforting to know, maybe I don't have to reconcile them. Maybe they're irreconcilable because of the way that ancient genealogies were dealt with. Not everybody is listed. They only picked the names that were important to them in order for them to tell their part of the story. Matthew had a different reason for listing genealogies than Luke did. Don't know exactly all those reasons, but that's how it turned out. I'm sure someday more of this stuff will make more sense to me. But now, why did I start off with genealogies in the story of Jesus? Because it's kind of important. If you know where you come from, that tells you a lot about who you're going to be or who you are. Case in point, my family came over from England many years ago, back in the late 1600s, early 1700s maybe. And my branch of the family settled in Georgia, where I'm living right now, as a matter of fact. And my family has always had a reputation of fairness. Now, this just isn't me glossing my family name because I want us to be fair. It seems to me like it's pretty much always been that way. When I was doing research, I went and searched the roll call records for the Union Army and the Confederate Army during the Civil War. And what I discovered is that of the 800 eligible men in the Garwood family in Georgia, southeast actually, that would be like Georgia, South Carolina, those states. Out of the 800, I think it was 880 eligible men who were eligible to serve in the military, less than 50 of them served for the Confederacy. The vast majority served in the Union Army. Apparently, my family was not a fan of slavery. Now, can I prove that absolutely to its beyond a shadow of doubt? No. I'm drawing conclusions from the fact that the majority of my family fought on the side of the Union, which probably makes me less acceptable to some of my Southern compatriots, but it is what it is. But I see that, and that explains my grandfather, who was always an incredibly fair-minded and even-handed man in the way he dealt with people, and my father. Now, you got to realize, my grandfather was only 2 generations removed from the Civil War. So, that means, and a son gets much of how he acts from his father. So my father, who is one of the most non-bigoted person I've ever met. He was raised by his father, my grandfather, who was raised by his father, my great-grandfather, who was raised by his father, my great-great-grandfather, who was in the Civil War vintage Garwoods. And it has been handed down from generation to generation. And by and large, every Garwood I have known has been very even-handed when it comes to racial bigotry and things of that nature. My older brother married into a Native American clan. That's my history. That's my lineage. And my lineage explains much of what I am and why I am the way I am. Jesus' lineage will explain much of who he is and why he was the way he was. Yes, he was a son of God, but he was also the son of man. And the blood of all his forebears ran in his veins. And like I said, there were men and women of ill repute. There were gloriously wondrous kings, and there were kings with gloriously wondrous faults. He was Messiah for all. He represents all. So genealogies are important to me in the story of Jesus. Now, starting tomorrow, we're actually going to look at Mary. This is going to be one of my favorite parts of this whole devotional series. Is we're going to be discussing Mary and why she is my biblical hero. And we're going to go to the beginning of Jesus' story on earth. And it begins with Mary getting pregnant. So until then, ladles and jelly spoons, here's my coffee. I'm Paige, and I'm out of here. Have a great day. Bye-bye.